The season just rolls on with some major shakeups in college football this past weekend. We're going to talk about it all, plus the Phillies. They let us down in the World Series. Lots to get to with this week's edition of Weather Wagers. Brett Thacker and Dan Tomaso with you. Dan, good to have you back in the chair this week. Last week you spent the week in Disney World. How was it?
I'll tell you what, it was a lot of fun, and I think my scenic view sure beats, unfortunately, this view behind me.
The fluorescent lights just don't quite cut it, although it's nice to have you back on set.
Oh, yes.
The Disney balcony was certainly a nice backdrop.
And watching the Phillies in the World Series in a sunny Orlando, Florida, it was strange, perhaps even stranger, watching the Eagles at the same time.
Yes, two screens. It was a two-screen night.
It was a two-screen night, but it was a lot of fun. I had a great time on my vacation. The warm, sunny weather followed me here, but we have some weather factors to talk about this week, and I'm thanking my lucky stars I'm not in Orlando this week.
Yeah, you dodged a bullet there. We're going to get into all of that because, again, on Weather Wagers, we talk weather, and one of the things that we are going to get into is Tropical Storm Nicole and how that could have an impact. But we have a little business to take care of first. We're going to do this right away because, remember, you were away last week. We couldn't pay this off. We had the Will Levis mayonnaise in coffee bet. That the quarterback of Kentucky, he likes this in his coffee, and he's had it. I've seen some other people try this because of him. You get to try this because if you remember, you lost the Tennessee at Kentucky bet 2 weeks ago. You picked Kentucky to cover.
They did not.
Tennessee blew them out.
So what does this tell you about this concoction? To me, it must mean it doesn't work because Will Levis's season has gone down the tubes.
All right, hold this up here. We are going to – see, I'm just going to – now this is –
oh, my God.
See, this is actual mayonnaise. You know, we got the packets here. And then you just, you get two packets. It's like having two creamers.
The cup is
in
hot.
There. Yeah,
I have to admit, the cup is pretty hot.
I'm so glad this is not me doing this, by the way. But if you're watching this and if you're just listening to it, check out the YouTube video because it's right in there. Here it is. Can you tilt it up? I don't know if we can tilt that up toward the camera.
Don't spill on the equipment there.
Yeah, well, yeah, you're right. We'll never get new stuff. But you could see what we have there. Stir that around. That is mayonnaise in coffee. Let's see how Mr. Tomaso likes this.
This is weird because it's actually kind of dissolving like creamer.
Well, no, that was his point. He thinks it's smoother than creamer. Will Levis does.
There's some chunks, though.
Well, listen.
I'm going to let it cool off for a second so I don't burn my mouth for the rest of the podcast, but I'll get back to this momentarily.
No, let it sit. I just looked in there. No thanks. Cottage cheese, anybody? No,
I
thanks.
hate cottage cheese.
Ooh, that could be another bet. Okay, we're going to get into the review of last week because there was some surprises again, and quite frankly, Dan, I don't know if we really did all that great. We're going to check the records here. Let's pull it up and show you what we've got. And again, 3-6, 4-5. Those are not great records.
Not great records, but keep in mind there were upsets both in college football and the NFL, and I think the NFL is more upside down this year than even college football, and that is saying something.
It is. We both picked the Phillies to win in the particular game with Nola there. They lost that. The Eagles did not cover the 14. Again, I think that was a Thursday night on the road. Probably should have been smarter with that pick. For some reason, I picked Jimbo Fisher to cover, and that blew up in my face. Take him out to the curb with the Christmas tree.
He might be the new coach at Southern Florida the way he's going.
He might. You got that one right, though. You picked Florida.
I did.
Money line.
I did. Well, and most of that was because of the quarterback. I mean, that's the one good thing Florida has going for it.
Yep, Anthony Richardson. Then you've got, we picked Oklahoma State, Texas. We were both right. I picked the under. You picked Kansas +2. Kansas State let us down. They got whooped by the Longhorns, right?
I'm very surprised by that, but that sets up a big week this week for the Longhorns.
Yeah. Coastal Carolina, App State. I got you with that one. I knew Coastal wasn't going to be beaten on that blue turf, that teal turf, Dan.
The Chanticleers did it. I am disappointed in Appalachian State, and Appalachian State's going to come up again in my discussion of Doppler Dandies this week.
Okay, they're a team that we're going to find out whether you like them or not. Jim Mora and his Haunted House, he did it. He covered against UMass, and then Ohio State didn't show up against Northwestern.
No,
we know what that's like. Purdue didn't show up against Iowa, and you got your SEC schools there. You missed the Syracuse pick. Pittsburgh got one over on you.
I know. I'm very disappointed that Syracuse is now on a 3-game slide after their promising start to the season.
Yeah.
Something's going wrong.
It's not great. And then we've got Georgia, LSU, both of those won, of course. So, but Dan, let's show everybody the records here because 3-6, 4-5, not great. However, on the season, when you're picking against the spread, if you can be 500 or higher, you hope certainly that's what we got. And so we are, in fact. I'm 500 right now. You picked up a little more on me, 51-47. So you're still looking pretty good, and I've got to get off the schneid here this week.
Well, and I picked some challenging ones in the Dandies here again this week, so you may have an opportunity to come back on me a little bit.
All right, we're going to get into that here in just a bit and talk about our games this week and talk about the weather, but it's time. Try that cup of coffee.
Okay.
This is going to be fantastic. Mayonnaise coffee. Let's just see if it goes down, how it goes down. Nice and smooth here. He's got a bit of an audience watching. Is it tart? Is it sweet? Is it gross? Is it different? What is it?
It just tastes like a terrible cup of coffee.
Are you sure?
It tastes like the bottom. You know the bottom of the coffee pot.
Well, but are you
it's
sure
a little
that
burnt taste? To
yeah,
it.
but are you sure? See, we didn't plan this out. We were scrambling before the pot. Are you sure that's just not our coffee? I should have had you.
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Well, you have to
I'll
keep sipping that,
but
and then
the chunks are, I think, the most freaky part about all this, because I have a feeling there's going to be a film left over at the bottom of the cup.
Ooh, like a pudding skin. You know,
I may not be the same the rest of the day. You might not see me for the 12:30.
Yeah, that may do a number on your stomach, but a bet is a bet. So you keep sipping that
I'm going
throughout the show here. Let's talk about the Phillies, the World Series, and we're going to bring in our guy Dave Shiner in a minute. But first, I just want your thoughts right now, Dan. Before we bring in Shiner, he's our audio engineer. He's a Phillies guy, just like we are. But you were down on Disney. We talked about what a major run this is. Again, quick hitting questions for you. Does this diminish? You know, it was kind of they're the team of destiny. They have to finish this. They didn't finish it. Does it diminish what they did this year?
I don't think so. I mean, it's what I talked about, say, 2 weeks ago on the podcast, that the matchup with Houston, I never felt favored the Phillies. I never thought they were the favorite. I think a lot of pundits didn't feel that way either. But they took it to 6 games. They had some very memorable moments, and there were opportunities, if the ball bounces a different way, so to speak, that they win at least one more game in that whole series. Now, do they win if it gets to Game 7? I'm not sure, but think about the moments Houston had to have. I mean, clutch hits from guys hitting 200 and below, amazing defensive plays. There were some things there that, yes, the Phillies may have been the team of destiny leading into the World Series, but for whatever reason, the moment seemed to work out better for them when they needed it.
And Dusty Baker got his ring.
Well, I think it's kind of a sorry story. I really do, because as a player, he was very successful. Yes, he didn't have a World Series as a manager, but the man has been in baseball for years. I could care less about his record in the World Series. I really could.
There's your hot take of the day.
The toothpick really bothers me, too. I don't know how he doesn't swallow that thing or stab himself a million times over.
I think the gloves bother me.
There's a lot there. And by the way,
there's some what do you call them? Not idiosyncrasies, but maybe some superstitious stuff going on there with Dusty.
Can I say something too? I almost think they won the World Series in spite of him, because there were some weird managerial decisions that he made.
You're
some
right.
Pitching changes that didn't make sense.
Left the starter in too long in Game 3.
Well,
right?
and even Verlander, Game 1, he clearly lost it, and he was huffing and puffing on the mound. And,
yes.
That's where I still give Rob Thompson, a ton of credit. He still managed very well, and people are going to go back to that unfortunate series there with the home run, the 3-run home run in Game 6. I still feel like he stuck to his guns. If he would have let Zach Wheeler go into that at bat as well, what if he gave up the 3-run home run? Then he's being second-guessed the other way.
Wheeler looked good in Game 6, so it wasn't his fault, and that was what we wanted to see. All right, let's bring in our audio guy, Shiner. Mr. Shiner, what did this mean to you to see the Phillies in the World Series again?
Well, first of all, it was one of the most magical runs we've had since the 2008 through 11 seasons.
That run was spectacular.
Yeah, it was. And it ended so abruptly with everybody watching Ryan Howard's Achilles blow up on him on live TV and couldn't even make it to first base. That was a tough, and the team had never been the same since. And this is the first time where it was like, you know what? Phillies baseball is awesome to watch.
It was.
And you know what? It was up and down throughout the season, but from that last win that they had to clinch the playoffs against Houston to the run of the World Series, it was just so much fun, and this team was buying in. Now, the one thing, and we were talking about this during the games, I want everybody in the world to realize that the Houston Astros, for the last 38 days of the season, going back to October 1st, went 15-3.
Cheated. Oh, I'm sorry. They went 15-3.
They went 15-3.
Sorry. Yes.
And
that was another
Bang
year.
that can slowly.
yeah, but the only team that
Right.
beat them, and they did it 3 times, was the Philadelphia Phillies. And they did it to clinch to get into the playoffs in Game 1. They lost those next 2 games. Playoffs started. They swept every single team that came their way. And then the Phillies came in and gave them an actual run. And I think what we saw in that playoff run from this team is what everybody thought this team could be. And you know what? We lived and died by the sword.
That's right.
We won 7-0 with nothing but home runs hit, and we got no hit by a bunch of bats that were swinging too hard.
Okay, I want to ask you two here before we move on from the Phillies quickly. The future of the franchise. Where do you see us going beyond this? Harper says thinks we're going to get a few more pieces. We've heard the rumblings. Are we building something again, or was this a once-off? Dan, you go first.
I was going to say that I don't think it's a once-off. I think the core is there. I think you rearrange the pieces slightly, move the chessboard a little bit around. I think you could probably get Schwarber out of left field in some way, shape, or form if you trade Rhys Hoskins. I like to see Schwarber at first, maybe an average hitting left fielder rather than just all power. I think the lineup.
I like Rhys Hoskins. I don't want to see him go, but I know he's had problems.
Well, he's a trade chip, and I think it's important not to rest on your laurels too much. We saw that with the Ruben Amaro era coming out of the 2009 World Series.
Yep.
And I think it is important to shuffle the deck when appropriate. And Bryson Stott moving to second to take Gene Segura's spot, I think could be huge because that would open up the shortstop market is hot. It is hot, and whether you get Carlos Correa, whether you get
Trey
Turner, Xander
Turner's
Bogaerts.
the guy, by the way.
Oh, I
mean,
think so.
If they can make a play for him, it's a whole nother team. I hate to see Gene
agree.
go, but
No. And lastly,
Gene didn't do enough in the playoffs, though, for me to say, let's bring him back.
Not with his bat. I mean, he was good defensively,
yes, he was.
which, again, has been criticized, too, our defense. But last thing, I mean, do you foresee us making a several-year run in the playoffs? That's my question. I mean, that's what they want to do. Are we doing that again?
I think so, and I think it's because of the expanded format. I think the Phillies have a chance every year now to get in. It's kind of like the college football format. I like the expansion because it keeps more teams involved. Obviously, the Mets and the Braves are very, very good teams. The Mets are going to spend
one heck of a division.
Money.
Yeah, they are.
And the Braves could spend a little bit more, too, based on their recent success. I think the Phillies, though, have a little bit more pitching in place than both teams if DeGrom doesn't re-sign with the Mets.
Yeah, he's a free agent now. Do you see this becoming a multi-season thing?
I do, and I think they're going to pick up some extra pieces, like we said, at shortstop and possible. I mean, the big thing about this is, one, we're writing the checkbooks like we're that team.
They want to spend the money.
Spending the money.
You got to spend.
A lot of this, I think, is going to come down to what is the issue with Bryce's arm.
Right.
If we can get him back out in the field to open up that DH spot, that also helps move some people around. Castellanos doesn't have to make, which, you know what? Nick's bat was light. He made some hellish plays.
They're
for
not
us
in
out
the World
office.
Series without him.
Yeah, he made 2 amazing grabs that kept them alive.
And he had some timely RBIs. I mean, the World Series, a lot of guys struggled. But it seems like the Philly fans, and at least the Twitter people, and I guess Twitter's not a good sample size, but
it rarely is.
People just were all over the guy, and I'm just like,
yeah,
what is wrong with you people?
Well, they were even going after his wife in the stands and stuff. And I mean, that's always
that's
a
what
low
that's what gives
fruit,
Philly a bad name. You're right. I think it's silliness. All right, gentlemen, thank you. We're going to move on from the Phillies talk. We're not going to dwell on this too much either, Dan. But let's quickly talk about the Eagles. They beat the Texans. Again, they should have beaten the Texans. It was a clunky game to start. It was certainly not an exciting Thursday night game. Now we travel. Do we go to Washington? It's Monday night, or do they come to us?
That is a good question.
I think we might be at home though. The Commanders, either way, the Commanders and the Eagles, Monday Night Football, another team we should beat, but they're sneaky.
They're sneaky because they're not playing Carson Wentz. Let's be real here.
And it is in Philly.
It is in
Philly. Okay,
I think the way they are playing. The offensive line looked a little porous this past week, but I also don't know how healthy they are. They have time to get – it's almost like a bye week. Playing a Thursday and then playing on a Monday night game, you get some extra time built in. Jordan Mailata Lane Johnson could be the two best tackles in the NFL. The middle of the line is playing phenomenal football, and all that's really doing is it's leaving a clean pocket for Jalen Hurts to carve up defenses. We are looking at, believe it or not, an MVP candidate on the Philadelphia Eagles at quarterback. 24 years old.
Made the right decision.
Made absolutely the right decision.
So you bow down to Howie, and I want you to admit on this podcast.
I do.
Okay.
And I still think, in my heart of hearts, the franchise knew something was up with Carson Wentz. I really think they knew more than we did.
Dan, he was flimsy.
Yeah.
You knew. How many seasons did he get injured?
Well, hold on. This, I think, comes down to one specific play that happened in Carson Wentz's career. And if you guys remember, a couple of years ago in the playoffs, Jadeveon Clowney hit him in the back of the head.
Blew him up.
And, people were praising Carson that year because he was throwing to Greg Ward and, Rager and these guys that, they were lacking the wide receiver core that we obviously have now.
Sure.
But ever since that hit, that's when he started being careless with the ball. Those extended plays, he was making the wrong decision. I honestly think his brain hasn't been the same since that hit.
I totally agree. And even if it's
Maybe
psychological.
You're right. Could be right.
And I think these teams picked up on it. Why Philly got rid of him, why Indy got rid of him. And now guess what? He's hurt again with the Commanders.
Well, and that's what I mean. You're not getting a reliable product. So, and it has nothing to do with him.
Nope.
It has everything to do with him, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah,
when
totally.
somebody is injured.
But here's the deal. We wouldn't be in this point both because of talent, but also because of salary. You can't
keep drinking.
You can't build this type of team that Howie has with a quarterback making $20 to $30 million. This team is deep because the quarterback is cheap. It's the way of the NFL.
It's all about money with you. But guess what?
It's the way.
You're right.
Yeah. Listen,
right.
Look at Tom Brady. Look at Aaron Rodgers. The teams are not good around them because they're salary hogs. I hate to say it.
You're right. We stay undefeated Monday night, right? Right? It's Philly.
I think so. I've said it before. They're going to get slipped. They're going to have a slip up. We're not going to expect it, but I don't think it's this one.
Okay, fair point. All right, now we're going to skip ahead here. We want to talk about our college football playoff rankings. You've got the rankings there, Dan. They came out Tuesday night. If you're listening to us Wednesday, Thursday, you know the rankings by now. But just to review here, I believe we had Georgia at number 1, which is not a surprise. Ohio State stays at number 2. Michigan at 3 and TCU at 4.
That is correct, my friend.
All of those are undefeated teams. And then the question becomes, it gets muddied after that. Who do we have?
We have Tennessee at 5. We have the Oregon Ducks at 6. LSU, which may be the dark horse of all dark horses right now, sitting there at number 7. 8, Lane Kiffin. Not Lane Kiffin, Lincoln Riley and USC at 8 and 1. Somehow, some way, Alabama, number 9 at 7 and 2. Dabo Sweeney's Clemson team at 8 and 1, but right below Clemson at number 11 is Ole Miss, and they have a big weekend.
Let's talk about Alabama briefly here because we want to get into the weather situation this weekend. But is this the end of the dynasty?
I don't know if it's the end, but I almost do wonder if this is part and parcel the transfer portal. If this is NIL, are these guys not as focused? Is Saban losing his grip a little bit because there's outside factors at play?
I think it might be NIL.
Yeah, you can't control these kids anymore the way it was done in the past.
They're coming for the coordinators.
Correct.
You know that.
Oh, and one of them is our guy, Bill O'Brien.
Yeah, but I understand the criticism, and I think Nick Saban will have 2 new coordinators next year in Tuscaloosa. I think he's got to mix things up again. And then, just throughout the course of this season, everything typically falls back to chalk, right? We were afraid Penn State would lose to Michigan and Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
They did.
They did.
Ohio State has had some clunkers, but they win. So we kept saying, Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, Georgia. Well, there's only one of those that is left standing that looks good. Now, Ohio State is still there for now. The Michigan situation will take care of itself when they play each other, but, it is not going to be –
or when Michigan plays Illinois. I'm still looking forward to that game.
Yeah, but they dropped a funky one against Mel Tucker this weekend. And that again, good teams should not lose to bad teams.
I agree with you. However, I just think the physicality of that game, it's going to be fun.
It's going to be fun. I do agree with you. You never know what can happen. Michigan is due for a clunker, too. although they do look like a complete team. But Clemson, Dabo Swinney's Clemson team is out. I think that you just can't lose that way to Notre Dame.
You simply can't.
So I think Alabama and Alabama and Clemson are done. And then we'll see where all of this falls. Can TCU remain in there?
No.
I don't. Well, if they go undefeated, they will.
They will, but they're just not at the same caliber. I hate to say it. It's just it's not the same style.
That's why the expansion will be fun, because they would get in with a 12 team, assuming they can win.
Who else would possibly get in this
Most
year?
years, Penn State.
That's
if
right.
If they can win out.
This year is proving my point about the expanded playoffs. A 2-loss Penn State team would likely be in.
If we can stay at 2 losses, I definitely agree. Let's talk about the weather now going into the weekend. We're going to get back to Penn State. That's one of our games of the week. All eyes are on the Atlantic and Tropical Storm Nicole coming up the coast. Now, we've got a frontal system. For those of you watching us on the YouTube stream, we have a frontal system in the Midwest. That is going to help to steer Nicole's remnants across the East Coast tomorrow and Friday, and then eventually exiting early Saturday. I think most games Saturday, Dan, should be okay. There are a few, though, that we highlight. Look at what's happening. Explain to the folks listening, especially what's happening behind Nicole for the weekend in the Great Lakes.
Yeah, so, we've been unseasonably warm here across the eastern third of the United States, if not half the country, and now there's going to be this cold air plunge behind the system. So we talk about this often in weather. You get a tropical storm in the mix. Sometimes it can flip a pattern very quickly.
That's exactly what it's going to do.
We are going to flip this pattern, go from unseasonable warmth to all of a sudden some bitter cold.
So we're going to mention some of the games in the Big Ten, the Great Lakes. We've got some NFL games in that region too, and they could have an impact here in terms of the weather. So right now, let's get into it. It is time for
Games of the Week.
Game number 1 is Thursday night. It's on Prime. Again, this is not a great game, quite frankly. I'd probably be rather out in a tropical storm than to watch the Falcons at Panthers on streaming. But they are going to be playing in it. That is at least one thing that makes this game kind of neat. And you've got the Falcons favored by 3. They just played 2 weeks ago, by the way.
They did.
And the Falcons won. It's hard to beat a team twice, but the Panthers look in disarray. The over-under is sitting at 44, tempting to take the under. It's bad football, and it's bad weather.
It's bad football. It's potentially bad weather on all fronts. I will say, do you know who the quarterback is for Atlanta?
I don't care.
You sure you don't care?
Who is it?
Marcus Mariota.
Really?
Yes.
From Oregon.
From Oregon, who, at one point was going to be the savior of the Eagles franchise.
Yeah.
He may be the savior of the Falcons. They may be divisional champs.
Well, they certainly, their division is a mess, and they could do it if they win. And this would be a divisional win.
Do you know the quarterback for Carolina? This is even harder.
No, I don't. But I do know it's not Baker Mayfield.
It's not Baker Mayfield. He's probably at home in his stadium in Cleveland, cleaning up the mess that is the Browns too.
Right.
It's P.J. Walker from Temple, who is the quarterback, because he was a Matt Rule disciple. Matt Rule brought him in as a backup.
Yeah. The one thing that I like in this game that may feature, I don't know how much the quarterbacks are going to come into play, not only for who they are, but again, the weather. It's probably going to be a run-heavy game.
No
Falcons,
Christian McCaffrey anymore for Carolina. He was traded.
You're right, but the Falcons rush for over 150 yards a game, which to me is fairly decent in the NFL.
They have Cordarrelle Patterson.
Yeah, now there's a name too from the past, but he's still around. And they
by the way,
you're almost done.
Almost done.
God bless you. Gosh, that's gross.
I feel like a greased pig. My mouth feels greasy.
And meanwhile, Carolina gives up 4.5 yards per carry. So keep that in mind.
So something's going to give here.
Meanwhile, Northwestern at Minnesota, that's at 3:30. We're going to get into that in a second because, Dan, we want to talk about the weather in that game, right? And then we've got Maryland at Penn State. Penn State, now this is interesting, started as a 12-point favorite, is down to 10. We were a little concerned in this game for the weather. I do think it could be blustery.
Yes.
I don't think they're going to be playing in the elements per se. It's going to be chilly, though.
It is going to be chilly. It's a later start, which helps them weather-wise, I do think.
Yes.
If it was an earlier start. There we go. Roar, Lions, roar. And I am thanking our lucky stars. This is not in Maryland because this is the Super Bowl for the Maryland Terrapins. For anyone who doesn't think these teams are rivals, They are, because it's the same recruiting ground for both teams.
It's a great point.
These guys know each other.
Yes, they do. Let's move on to some Sunday action for you now with the NFL. We are going Vikings-Bills because that is going to be a weather game with potential lake effect snow. This is interesting. You pointed out to me something I wasn't aware of this morning, that Josh Allen has a little elbow issue going on.
It's very concerning for them because it's a UCL, the same injury that Bryce Harper has. If you're a quarterback playing in cold weather, you know how much that elbow is going to bark?
Yeah, they said they think he's going to be able to go, but I got to tell you, this makes me want to stay away from this game and all counts, but we have to. It's one of our games of the week. We have to pick it, but man, that is tough to pick against that number.
By the way, did you see the video of Kirk Cousins celebrating with the Vikings?
With his glasses.
I think they got some mojo now all of a sudden.
They look pretty good. Cowboys take on the middling Packers at Lambeau. Talk about weather again Sunday. We're going to have to see if it actually snows, but the wind is going to be kicking around. It's going to be cold. I think temperatures.
Lambeau Field.
It's going to be frozen tundra.
Yes,
Lambeau Field.
I think so. And
30s.
Cowboys are rolling.
They are. They look good. Their defense with Micah Parsons looks good. So let's talk about the weather here. Charlotte. That is, again, we're talking about the Falcons and Panthers Thursday night, Bank of America Stadium. It's going to be wet, and that's a night game. So the sun icon is on there. Sometimes these things are automatic. It ain't going to be sunny. It's going to be pouring rain.
No. If anything, maybe the day starts out a little bit sunny, but clouds roll in quickly. If you are worried about this game for pick'ems, for fantasy, bank on heavy rain and even thunderstorms. That's the other thing that we have to keep in mind here. A lightning delay is not out of the question. There's the potential of some severe weather in South Carolina, North Carolina, possible tornado watches near the coast. This is not going to be a great situation.
Don't tell Al Michaels that. He may flee. I know I wouldn't want to be there either, but we are going to pick that game. Here you could see it. As we move into Thursday night, the rain will be coming down at a very steady clip, and as Dan said, it's heavy, and then the wind may come with it along with a few thunderstorms, and that hangs around into Friday. It's going to be an ugly Thursday night game, that rain developing at that point, and the wind, too. Keep that in mind for, again, fantasy purposes, or as you said, pick them. It's going to be breezy, winds at about 10 to 20 miles an hour. Then we shift to the Saturday games. Penn State and Maryland looks like a nice day. Now, 60 is the high, but Dan, by 3:30, we're going to see these temperatures fall throughout the day.
Correct.
I think temperatures are likely going to be in the 40s for most of that game.
I agree. It's something to certainly watch for. If you are going up and tailgating, wear layers, especially with the wind involved. Pretty cold, too, by the time we get past sunset, and this game will be going past sunset.
I agree, and then you have Minneapolis again. That game could feature some flurries with Northwestern and Minnesota, 30 degrees.
This is Big Ten ball right here.
November.
Good luck to the Southern schools that may get involved in Big Ten play.
November is here, I'm telling you what. Now let's go to Sunday's games, and again, we're talking about more. Well, no, we want to show you the future radar here because, again, when we're talking about snow on Saturday, that Minneapolis-Minnesota game is at 3:30. Look at those bands. They could certainly be playing in at State College 48. See what I'm talking about? Both games are going to be raw, and the potential is there for there to be wind at both of these games, too. So Jake Pinniger, Penn State kicker, hit a 50-yarder last week.
He got a big hug from James Franklin. I mean, I held my breath every second that ball was in the air.
100%, but you can clearly see the winds are going to be blowing around 10 to 20 miles an hour. Then we go to Sunday's games again. I think the snow is in question here. Everything is going to have to line up perfectly for there to be snow at either of these games, but I want you to focus on the temperatures.
Ooh, bitter.
So let's show you the radar here because as we look ahead into Sunday, if you're watching us on YouTube, if you're listening, we'll try to describe it for you. The winds are going to kick around at both locations, Green Bay and Buffalo. And I mean to tell you what, I think we are probably, Dan, talking about at least winds gusting maybe up to 30 miles an hour.
Yeah, it's something we certainly have to watch for here. We're talking about consistent winds, 10, 20 miles per hour, gusting to 30, 40 miles per hour times. There we go. Now it's moving.
Yeah, and again, this isn't something to sneeze at, especially if you're going to be attending these games or even if you're playing in one of these games. It just isn't fun. So where does that leave us with our picks for our games of the week? I will tell you, we both like the Falcons.
We do. And
Is it tempting to pick the under here, though?
It is. However, I just think the Falcons are probably the best team in the division.
Yeah,
which is weird to say because they've been awful.
It's been an awful division.
Yes.
Thank goodness we don't have to watch it. Northwestern at Minnesota, that is a 3:30 game on Saturday. Do you want to explain yourself here? Because I'm picking Minnesota to cover and row that boat.
So there was a quote from Rick Neuheisel on the show that I listened to on Monday that says, if Pat Fitzgerald wasn't coaching football, he may want to become a meteorologist. And so my ears perked up. Apparently, he planned for different types of weather in that Ohio State game, and Rick Neuheisel credited him for doing that because they had a better plan than Ohio State. And that takes me back to the Penn State game. Pat Fitzgerald had a good game plan against the Nittany Lions. They were going for the strips. They were going for the fumbles and the turnovers, and they kept that game close. I think this game is close because of the weather. And keep in mind, Minnesota had a 3-game losing streak. I am not sure they're totally put together as a football team.
Boy, it is hard to argue with your reasoning. I just think the talent of Minnesota will win out here. But, Dan, I mean, again, sound reasoning, and I love that story about Pat Fitzgerald. Then Maryland at Penn State. You're picking Maryland to cover the 10.
I am.
You think this is going to be the clunker?
I think this could be a clunker. I'm actually very surprised at how easy the Indiana game was. I kind of thought that could be a clunker. Now, they knocked out the quarterback early.
They did, but that's a big part of the reason why I am going to pick Penn State to keep rolling here. I think this team has confidence. They're coming back at home, and I think that could help them. But, again, Maryland, on paper, has more talent than Indiana.
I just think this is the game Maryland looks forward to every year. I'm just going to put it out there.
I agree with you.
And
I
they
agree
give
with
us
you.
a heck of a battle most years.
Not all the time, though.
I think Penn State wins, but 10 is too healthy for me.
Okay.
And remember, I sent you earlier in the week. This was the line to stay away from one pundit.
You did, and I that's why I put it on here. But it is going to be hopefully over by halftime. But I agree. You never know with Penn State, so keep an eye on that one. Vikings and Bills now. I have decided. So earlier in the week, the number was 7.5.
Mm-hmm.
That was a little too high for me. I took the Vikings plus 7.5. This morning, I changed it because the number came down to 5.
Interesting.
I took the Bills minus 5.
Interesting.
Then you told me you heard about Josh Allen, and I said, that's it. I have no idea what's going to happen in this game. I'm going to just say wind, cold. If Josh Allen can't play, I'm just going to hold my breath and take the under here.
So we have a friend who's a Jets fan. The Jets started their game against the Bills with their kicker literally falling on his butt.
I saw it. It was everything the Jets are known for, yes.
The Jets then won the game, and the Bills looked very pedestrian.
That's a good word for it. And they have not just in this game.
Correct.
You know I have a thing with the Bills now.
I know. You shouldn't trust them.
They've cost me bets before in this podcast.
And do you know the only loss the Vikings have?
To the Eagles.
To the Philadelphia Eagles, the best team in college or in the NFL right now.
Yeah.
So, with all those things being said, I picked the Vikings to at least cover, and I almost want to say the Vikings win.
Well, listen, I have no idea. So I'm going to just, again, hold my nose on that one and take the under. Both of us like the Cowboys. Is that too easy here?
I think so.
But what I'm saying is, though, should we be thinking about this more?
No.
Green Bay at home, trying to get back on track.
I don't know what Green Bay is. They cannot score. Everything was hard on Sunday for Green Bay. They're lost. They are very lost.
And they're going up against a pretty good defense, right?
Yeah. And don't you think Mike McCarthy wants to go into Green Bay?
I think he would love it.
And open a can of you-know-what?
Yeah, nope. I agree. 5, I think they can handle it. All right, let's move on to
Under the Radar.
This is a fun one on Saturday. North Carolina at Wake Forest. And again, it's an ACC matchup. Not a lot of national people are going to pay attention to, but we are because we love college football.
We do.
And Wake Forest not having the season a lot of people thought they would. But meanwhile, there's Mac Brown, and I wrote in the column this week that I said, am I a fool to keep picking on Gene Chizik? Because the North Carolina defensive coordinator has been much maligned by yours truly. And yet, the Tar Heels are 8-1 and could be heading to face Clemson in the ACC title game. But, of course, now they have to go to Winston-Salem and take on Wake Forest. I want to point out, if you're watching, and if not, that's okay. We're going to tell you what it is. But look at the over-under. 77. That, I think, is one of the highest over-unders I've seen.
This season, it's the highest I've seen.
Yeah.
And, obviously we had the SMU game this past week that broke the records for points in a game.
Yes.
But I'm not sure where this line comes from because every time we think there's going to be a game that points are aplenty, They seem to slow each other down.
Yeah, and again, I look at Mac Brown, what he's done. These quarterbacks, Sam Hartman at Wake Forest is good, but they've lost some games. Matt, I do not trust Gene Chizik. I do not trust that defense, but they are finding ways to win. An 8-1 team is still a good football team,
very good football
even with
team.
a weak defense.
And they only lost to Notre Dame. So, the other thing to keep in mind about Wake Forest is their loss to Clemson was a heartbreaker. They could have easily won that game.
That was an overtime, I believe.
Yeah, that was the overtime game where Dabo barely escaped. That's when we thought DJ Uyunglele was going to kind of resurge, but obviously that hasn't happened.
This game, of course, is Saturday night. So, Dan, let's check out the weather as you take another swig here of your coffee. And we do anticipate there to be some clouds and some showers at the outset of the day. But as we move into this evening, I think they're going to be clear. But it's going to turn cold and windy again. I think that the winds could have a factor here because, to me, I mean, it is only a field goal. It's 3 and a hook. I think the game could come down to a field goal, and we could be looking at some winds here Saturday night. Now, this has the winds calming down. I got to be honest, I'm not sure I like what this model is saying.
It might underdo it a little bit.
I think it's underdoing it a bit. So, windy and chilly conditions in Winston-Salem Saturday night. Where does that leave us with our pick? Well, again, I have no idea. I really don't. I think North Carolina's defense is going to cost them, but every time I think that they win, that is a high number on a cold and windy night. So, again, I'm going to throw my hands up and take the under.
I'm going to take Wake Forest at 3.5 only because I think it's going to be a raucous crowd. I think the Tar Heels have escaped a couple of games they should have lost, including the Appalachian State game. I think this is Wake Forest's night, especially at home.
I do. I mean, listen, I think North Carolina is going to get tripped up again here soon. All right, now it is time for my best bets.
Time now for Brett's Best.
Happy to talk Alabama and Ole Miss. Alabama's a favorite here. When are people going to learn? Vegas says Alabama's a 12-point favorite on the road again. I mean, has Vegas not been watching college football this year?
You just have to wonder, though, when does it get figured out? And if it does, watch out. So the talent is still there. That's the problem.
Is it? Because I want to quibble on that. They don't really have a wide receiver that's been able to separate.
They don't. That's where they probably did not.
Their secondary
the stock
looks sketchy, which is Nick Saban's specialty. They have a quarterback. We know that.
They do.
They have Will Anderson.
They do.
I'm telling you, it almost feels like Vegas is asleep here.
Now, this is not my pick because I didn't pick this game, but I would pick Ole Miss to cover those 12 points.
Well, I will reveal that coming up here shortly. Nebraska at Michigan.
Now, why do you like this game?
Well, I like this game because, to me, I would probably rank Michigan number 2.
I would, too, based on quorum, based on that running attack.
This is a team that we pay attention to. We're obviously, as Penn State fans, Michigan's in our division. We've played them. And Georgia looks like the most complete team. They are really now, especially with what happened on Saturday, with them clobbering Tennessee and with Alabama losing. Mm-hmm. Georgia's the new Alabama. Kirby's taken over the crown from Nick Saban. He's the reigning champion. And I think that Michigan looks like the next most complete team. They play well defensively. They have good fundies. They do everything they need to do in the running game, mm-hmm. and they're facing a Nebraska team that it's a nice story. It's won some games after Scott Frost was fired, but they don't have the Jimmies and the Joes to go up there and compete.
They don't.
And just like Michigan had a slow start against Rutgers, they finished just fine. They're a team that's built to cover that big spread, and I like them.
And they're not a team that necessarily will start hot based on their offense. Their offense is more wear you down.
Correct.
It takes some time. So these early scores...
But they're still scoring points.
Right. These early scores may not be indicative of how well they're playing.
And then I'm going back, the Jaguars at the Chiefs. And again, the Jaguars have screwed me so many times this year. When I pick them, they lose. When I pick against them, they win. They cover. And I love Doug Peterson, and I love Trevor, but I probably should stay away from this game. But I'm going to do, what's the definition of insanity?
You keep doing it over and over again.
And I'm going to go back to that. Well, the Chiefs are favored in Arrowhead. And I like the Chiefs. We're going to, of course, reveal our picks soon, but now it's time for your dandies. And you gave a little preview here. Cue up the music and then tell us what you got.
Sure.
It's Doppler Dandies.
So my buddy Tyler in State College, who I've known a long time, has picked on me all season for being on the Spartans. So I'm going to remain consistent.
And Tyler should pick on you. It was a terrible pick.
I will say this much. They surprised me against Illinois.
Yes, they did.
And,
Where did that come from?
And that game against Penn State is still looming at the end of the year. That's why I'm watching this game closely. Penn State.
Tuck coming.
Yep, Tuck is coming. Rutgers and Michigan State are the way Penn State rounds out the year. So this game, I think, is very important to watch. Rutgers is playing well under Greg Schiano. They're trying to become bowl eligible. Michigan State trying to become bowl eligible. It's at home for Michigan State, and I just thought this was a big spread. -10 to two teams that are closer than many people think, I think is a big spread. So that's something to watch.
Yeah, and then you're going to the Sun Belt, Fun Belt.
I love the Sun Belt this year because James Madison, up from Division II or 1AA, they are having a pretty good season. Now they're on a 3-game losing streak. They have lost to Georgia Southern, Marshall, and Louisville. But Old Dominion has an old friend in Ricky Ronnie.
Ricky Ronnie, yeah.
Old Dominion probably will not be bowl eligible this year, but James Madison could become bowl eligible with a win here this week, which for a team just joining in the fun of the Sun Belt.
They have been a pleasure to watch, and I will say they have won me some money this year.
Well, there you go. There you go. And by the way, they beat Appalachian State, which a lot of people use as a measuring stick at that Group of 5 level. So just something to watch there, and I think it's a great story. And then finally, maybe one of the best stories in college football is the Green Wave of Tulane.
Yeah. They are phenomenal, and by the way, they're ranked.
They're ranked
in the college football playoff.
And I believe this is one of the first times they've been ranked playing at home against another ranked opponent. It's been a long history of Tulane not playing good football.
Do you have those rankings?
Yeah.
Is UCF ranked? Yes, they are, aren't they?
Yes, I believe they are ranked.
So let's see where they're at, because I want to say, is Tulane 12, 13?
Of course, I'm not getting a quick answer here. Hold on.
Well, that's all right. But, it's a fun game because you've got Gus Malzahn, who, is down at UCF.
UCF coming in at 22.
22, and then Tulane is...
Tulane is 17.
17.
So
okay, so that's a good matchup.
This could wreck one of their seasons, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But UCF is 7-2. Tulane is 8-1. And again, the Green Wave, I have riding the wave here.
Okay, that is going to be fun. All right, let's hear it, Shiner.
Final picks.
This is how the chart looks this week. We are going to try to get a winning record if possible. The Falcons play in Slop Thursday night. We're both going to pick them to cover. You're picking Northwestern with meteorologist Pat Fitzgerald.
At the helm.
You're going to ride with them, and I'm going to row the boat. We are against one another for Penn State and Maryland. I'm going to say Penn State continues to dominate in the run game and get the win.
And by the way, I hope they do.
Yeah, I know, but I think Maryland plus 10. I mean, it's certainly not a bad pick. Some of these things could go either way. I'm taking a couple of unders. One of them is in the
the order might be screwed up.
Yeah,
on my side.
the Vikings and the Bills game. You're going to pick the Vikings, as you said, maybe even to outright win. You're going to pick them to cover.
I'm going to pick them to cover. I think 5 is very doable for this team the way they're playing.
Yep, you've got, and I'm gonna also. We both are on the Cowboys to cover, which is good. Wake Forest, do you think is going to cover? And that under the radar game, man. I don't know what's going to happen. 77's a high
That's
number.
A lot.
I'm probably going to look like a fool, but I'm going to take the under.
Could that be a 5-hour football game if they actually get to 77 points?
I'll probably be asleep by the end of it. I am going to pick Ole Miss to cover the 12. Listen, Alabama's been a double-digit favorite on the road several times this year. They've either lost outright or haven't covered. I mean, again, Vegas, wake up. I know I'm going to look like a fool again, but I have to pick Ole Miss. It's just...
As our friend Lee Corso would say, great pick.
Great pick because, Lane Kiffin wants to beat Saban so bad.
Yes.
Michigan, going to take them to cover the 29.5, and I'm taking the Chiefs. Go Chiefs.
Yep, I think the Chiefs are going to roll. I really do. I think, they're doing just enough to win, kind of like the Eagles are right now in the middle of the season.
You're picking a trifecta of favorites. No dogs for you this week.
No dogs this week in the Doppler Dandies. I take Michigan State to win outright at -10, although I do think it's kind of a stinky line, something to watch there. Rutgers could give them a battle through
Sneaky.
4 quarters. James Madison, I think it would be a great story for college football. It just shows that these smaller programs can make an impact. I think it's a great thing. And then Tulane, on the same vein, I think it would be a tremendous story if they knock off UCF. And
it's a fun story.
UCF has one of our friends, too.
Gus Malzahn. Yeah, that's what I say. Yeah,
so
it's always fun. And Willie Fritz, I believe, at Tulane.
Yes,
he's fun
Willie
to watch.
Fritz.
All right, so we want to hear from you. Again, you did it. You downed this coffee.
It's gone.
I am so impressed.
Let the record show.
I am so... pull it up there. Show it. I am so impressed with you that you were able to do that bet. It is phenomenal. We want to hear from you. You can contact us on social media, on email, weatherwagers@gmail.com. Meteorologist Brett Thakra and Dan Tomaso on Facebook. Brett Thack, ABC27, Twitter and Instagram, and yours are?
Doppler Dan. You can find me, Doppler Dan, Twitter and Facebook, Meteorologist Dan Tomaso on Facebook, and I would not recommend the Mayo and coffee, and I think that's probably why Will Levis, his draft stock, is ultimately falling.
Yeah, maybe that's not such a smart thing. Real quick, give a 3-shot. Mr. Shiny, you want to peace out here?
Peace out, homies.
I love it, and he is. We're going to be watching those Eagles
Watch our Eagles fly
on Monday night. Dan, last second thought from you as we move into the weekend. Is there anything that you expect shakeup-wise with these rankings? TCU, again, we didn't talk about quickly, has to go to Texas.
I think that could be the shakeup.
Who's going to be number 4 then? Tennessee move right back up?
I think I'm surprised Tennessee isn't number 4. I think it's very unfortunate. I know the game against Georgia wasn't all that close, but they had such a great run.
They have the 2 best wins in the country. They
I know.
beat Alabama and LSU. Can't forget about that.
And LSU, I mentioned it earlier, they are a dark horse here for the playoff race because they have a path.
Yeah,
they
do.
have a path.
They have to beat Georgia, though, to do
Yes,
it,
they do.
likely in that SEC title game. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. Remember, for the East Coast, Friday looks wet as Tropical Storm Nicole starts to really pound certain areas. We are going to keep you posted on that. Dan, take us out.
Have a great week of football, everybody. We'll see you on the flip side.